Ready for a deep dive? Today we're uncovering the surprising origins of everyday inventions. We've got Grandes Inventos de la Historia as our guide, and let me tell you, this book is packed with stories about how human ingenuity actually took shape.
Yeah, it's amazing how these groundbreaking inventions, they didn't just appear out of nowhere, right?
All right.
They're all part of this chain reaction of innovation. One discovery kind of leads to the next and
Totally. Like a giant web of aha moments, all connected through time.
exactly.
Okay, I'm ready to get tangled up in that web. So, where are we starting on this journey?
Let's kick things off with something, well, deceptively simple, but crazy impactful, the wheel.
Right.
And it's not just about carts and chariots, it's
Uh,
about this fundamental principle that changed, well, everything. Rotary motion.
Ooh, okay, I can already tell this is going to be way deeper than I thought. I got to admit, when I picture those first wheels, I see something like super clunky and wobbly,
Yeah.
barely holding those early carts together.
You're not far off, actually. Those earliest wheels, think 3000 BC in Mesopotamia. They were basically simple wooden discs. But the real genius is in that simplicity, that spinning motion, rotating around an axis. It just unleashed all these possibilities that no one could have even predicted.
So it's way more than just moving things from point A to point B.
Exactly. Think about it, right? The same principle behind that simple wheel, it also drives water wheels for power. And then there are gears. Gears make complex machinery even possible. So the wheel, it isn't just about transportation. It's woven into the DNA of the Industrial Revolution.
Whoa. See, I never made that connection before. So those Mesopotamians, they had no idea they were setting the stage for factories and mass production and all that.
It's incredible, right? The ripple effect of one single invention, and it spans millennia.
It really is.
And speaking of ripple effects, let's talk about another invention where rotary motion is key. The steam engine.
The steam engine. Okay, my brain immediately goes to James Watt tinkering away in his workshop.
Yeah.
But something tells me this story starts way before that.
You're right. Long before Watt, there was this guy, Hero of Alexandria, way back in the 1st century BC.
Wow, okay.
Now, Hero, he wasn't building locomotives or anything. He was more into, well, novelties.
Novelties. Okay, now I really want to know, what kind of steam-powered novelty are we talking about here?
Picture this, right? A hollow sphere mounted on a pivot. Steam is escaping from these two nozzles on the sides, and as the steam shoots out, it causes the sphere to spin.
Okay.
It's a far cry from a train, sure,
Yeah.
but it proved that people understood the power of steam nearly 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution even happened.
That's mind-blowing. So if they had steam-powered, toys in ancient Rome, why did it take until the 1700s for someone to actually harness that power for something practical?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It seems so simple looking back, but turning that principle into a workable engine, that was a huge challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
It took an inventor named Thomas Newcomen in 1712 to develop the first practical steam engine. It was used for pumping water out of mines.
So Newcomen's engine, that was like the stepping stone to Watt's breakthroughs.
Exactly. Newcomen's engine, it was groundbreaking for sure, but it was really inefficient and clunky. It was James Watt, almost 60 years later, who actually revolutionized the design.
What did Watt do differently?
He made a bunch of key improvements, like this thing called the double-acting piston. It used steam pressure on both sides to get way more power. But the real game changer, the thing that changed everything, was adapting the steam engine for rotary motion.
Ah, there it is again. Rotary motion.
Yeah.
So Watt took Newcomen's engine and basically figured out a way to make it spin.
Exactly. And with that, the steam engine wasn't just stuck pumping water anymore. It could power, well, almost anything. Which leads us to, well, a period in history where transportation was completely transformed.
Cue the steamboats, trains, all those iconic images from the Industrial Revolution.
And it all goes back to that simple principle, rotary motion. The wheel, the steam engine, they're not separate inventions. They're all links in this chain of innovation that, honestly, still shapes our world today.
Okay, so we've got these steam engines, totally changing how we get around.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess those first steam-powered cars, not exactly a smooth ride, right?
Oh, you got that right. Notorious for breaking down.
Yeah.
And let's just say prone to overheating a bit.
Yikes. Yeah, not exactly a Sunday drive kind of car.
Yeah.
I can definitely see why the gasoline engine won out in the end.
Right.
But before we hit the gas on that story,
Hey.
I want to rewind a bit to another, well, electrifying chapter, mastering electricity.
And you know what's so cool about the story of electricity?
What?
It's like this blend of, careful experiments and then bam, total accidents.
Right, like those ancient Greek philosophers rubbing amber on fur.
Exactly.
I bet they weren't trying to, like, invent power lines or anything.
No, they just stumbled onto static electricity.
Yeah.
That same spark you get on a dry day with a wool sweater, you know?
Oh, totally.
But for centuries, that was it. Just a curiosity.
Even Benjamin Franklin's famous kite experiment.
Yeah.
Talk about a light bulb moment, right?
Right.
Although I did read somewhere that people were totally freaked out by his lightning rods at first.
It's wild how an idea can be so groundbreaking, but people are still scared of it.
Yeah.
But see, Franklin's experiment, it wasn't about harnessing the electricity. It was about understanding it. Proving that lightning, that was actually electrical current, that was huge.
So how do we get from, like, sparks and lightning bolts to electricity we can actually use? Enter Alessandro Volta and his stack of metal plates, right? The voltaic pile.
Yes.
Gotta admit, though, I could use a little refresher on how that thing actually worked.
It's so clever when you really think about it. So Volta, he took these discs of zinc and copper, separated them with cloth soaked in salt water, and then stacked them up like a layer cake almost.
Oh, okay.
And that arrangement, that created an electrical current, the first real battery.
So before Volta, electricity was like, what, trying to catch lightning in a ball. And he's the one who figured out how to make it a steady flow, like a controlled stream, instead of this, like, zap out of nowhere.
A perfect way to put it. And just like that controlled stream, it made those portable lanterns possible, right?
Yeah.
Eventually led to flashlights, all that. Being able to store electricity, control it, total game changer. Open the door for so many inventions, especially in how we communicate.
It really is amazing to think how far we've come from, like, shouting across a field to sending messages at the speed of light, basically.
Right.
And speaking of which, no way we could talk communication breakthroughs without Samuel Morse and that iconic message, "What hath God wrought?"
Such a famous message.
Yeah.
And it kicked off this whole new era of instant communication. The telegraph, that's what let people send messages across continents, like instantly.
Just mind-blowing how revolutionary that was, you know? Laid the groundwork for global communication. Like, I mean, even the podcast we're recording right now, it all goes back to that.
Crazy, right?
But even with the telegraph, still limited to, well, telegrams, right?
Right.
Then along comes Alexander Graham Bell, and he's got this dream of transmitting actual sound through wires.
The telephone.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. An invention that transformative, people thought it was just a toy at first.
Really?
Yeah. Can you believe Western Union, you know, the telegraph people? They could have owned the patent for a measly $100,000.
Oh, man, what a missed opportunity. It just shows you, even the most groundbreaking stuff, it's not always obvious at first.
Totally.
They're probably like, who needs to hear voices when you can send a perfectly good telegram?
Right.
But I have a feeling that even with telephones changing how we talk to each other, life back then was still pretty dim.
Yeah.
Literally.
You're telling me, imagine a world lit by gaslight, inefficient, smelly, not to mention a little dangerous for lighting your house.
Yeah, makes you really appreciate a good light switch.
Right.
Enter Thomas Edison, determined to bring light to the masses.
Yes.
He spent over a year, right, just experimenting with light bulb filaments, trying to find one that wouldn't burn out after 5 minutes.
He was determined.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Edison, not the invention alone, but his vision. Not just a light bulb, but a whole system to make electricity affordable, safe, bring it to everyone's homes, businesses, you name it.
Talk about a bright idea. He really did illuminate the way to the modern world. And his work, it paved the way for the whole age of electronics. Which brings us to an invention that's tiny but mighty. The transistor.
The transistor is like the best example of how this little thing no one thinks about can revolutionize everything. See, before transistors, you had electronics, but they used these bulky vacuum tubes.
Oh, right.
And those were inefficient, like the clunky ancestors of our gadgets today.
So we're picturing like computers that took up an entire room.
Oh, yeah?
Probably generated enough heat to warm a small village in the process.
Exactly. Not exactly practical for everyday use.
It's like electronics went on a serious diet. Out with the vacuum tubes. In with these tiny but mighty transistors.
It's not even just about size, though, right?
Yeah.
Transistors were way cheaper to make, way more reliable. That's what led to integrated circuits. Those are basically like miniaturized circuits, thousands, even millions of transistors packed onto a single chip.
Okay, so integrated circuits are like tiny cities,
Yeah.
but for electronics. With like millions of these little transistors all working together.
Perfect analogy.
That is mind-blowing. How something so small can be so powerful really makes you appreciate all the tech we have today.
It really does. Those early computers stuck with those vacuum tubes. Ah, limited, but then transistors, integrated circuits, computing power just exploded, and well, here we are, devices everywhere, our whole digital world.
From horse-drawn carriages to spaceships, all thanks to these tiny little transistors. But speaking of amazing advances, I feel like we got to talk about the microscope. Such a game changer.
The microscope, people don't realize how important that invention was for understanding, especially in medicine, it's huge GE.
You know, it's funny. I always picture like scientists in labs, all serious, peering into these microscopes. But the early ones, weren't those more like high-tech toys almost?
Kind of. They were pretty basic compared to what we have now, but those early microscopes, they got people curious. Led to some surprising discoveries, too.
Like what?
Galileo, right, the telescope guy. He used a modified telescope once to look at insects. Described them as flies as big as lambs.
Get out. No way.
Yep. Before microscopes, people had no idea what caused disease. Crazy to think about now.
Talk about a time before hand sanitizer. But seriously, it makes you realize how much we just take for granted these days. So when did things click? When did we figure out the connection between this microscopic world and, like, getting sick?
It happened gradually, but a big turning point was Edward Jenner. He's the one who came up with the smallpox vaccine, late 1700s. Right.
Right.
He'd noticed that milkmaids, when they got cowpox, it's like a milder version of smallpox, they seemed to be protected from the real deal.
Wait, so he basically gave someone cowpox on purpose, hoping it'd stop them from getting smallpox?
Basically. It was risky, for sure, but it worked.
Wow.
That along with microscopes getting better, it's like a whole new chapter opened up. Scientists could actually see these, like, invisible enemies, finally understand how they spread.
And that's where vaccines really take off, right? Once you know how the enemy works, you can teach your body how to fight back.
Exactly. Jenner, he paved the way for Louis Pasteur, Jonas Salk, so many others. Vaccines for everything from rabies to polio. It blows my mind. Diseases that used to be death sentences, now we can prevent them, all because we learned to see this tiny world.
Incredible. We started with the wheel. Now we're talking life-saving vaccines. This whole journey, it just shows you even the most different seeming inventions, they're all connected. Part of this bigger story, this human need to figure things out.
And that story, it never ends, right? Every day there are new discoveries, all building on what came before. It makes you wonder, what about tomorrow? What'll be the big inventions then? What'll people look back on and be like, wow, how'd they ever live without that?
Such a good question. Makes you think. But one thing's for sure, from simple wheels to life-saving vaccines, it all comes back to human curiosity. That need to understand, to create, it's pretty amazing.
It really is. And who knows what incredible breakthroughs are just around the corner. The best might be yet to come.